Is Shadowdark's Pit Fighter class as unkillable as it seems? Find out today on Runeforged. Hey folks, I'm William, this is Runeforged, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at the Pit Fighter class from Shadowdark's Red Sands supplement, as well as the new rules for Enduring Wounds and the Pit Fighting Downtime activity. Be sure to stick around till the end of the video where I give my final thoughts on the Pit Fighter class. Is it absolutely busted, completely underpowered, or perfectly balanced, as all things should be? Alright, so I've got the Pit Fighter class rules pulled up here. Let's see what we're working with. Blood-soaked warriors circling each other in a roaring arena. Scarred desert bandits dueling for the right to lead their gang, or brash tavern brawlers who never turn down a challenge. Seems cool. The flavor here seems right on point. All right, so for weapons here, it looks like pit fighters can use all weapons. That makes a lot of sense to me. You see a lot of exotic weapons being used in the arena for like the pit fighter / gladiator themed characters that you see in fictions. I do wonder if this is like a class that I designed. I wonder if I would have included traditional ranged weapons like bows and crossbows. I think I typically associate pit fighters with being more of a melee focused class. But I guess if I'm thinking back to like the Gladiator movie, for example, I'm pretty sure they had gladiators in chariots using bows at one point, and it doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility that gladiators would be well trained with like traditional range weapons. I just wouldn't make it a focus of the class. So I guess I am curious to see if there's going to be some mechanical incentives for the pit fighter to use a more melee focused weapon set. So we'll have to be on the lookout for that. Looks like for armor here, they can use leather armor and shields. That makes sense to me. No notes. For hit points, it looks like they get 1d8 per level, which makes a lot of sense to me. I imagine this is going to be a pure martial class that's roughly analogous to the fighter. I do think that if any class were to have 1d10 hit points, the pit fighter would be a pretty good candidate, but I also like to keep the HP values in my games relatively low, so I think going with 1d8 was probably the correct decision. Next, let's take a look at the Flourish ability here. It says 3 times per day, regain 1d6 hit points when you hit an enemy with a melee attack. Okay, cool. One, I do think it is pretty thematic. Flourish goes along with like kind of playing to the crowd aspect of the pit fighter or gladiator, so that makes sense to me. I also think it kind of makes sense that after you like pull off a cool move in the arena that you might get a little bit of second wind, which is kind of represented by the hit point gain here, so I like that. And I especially like the fact that it emphasizes here when you hit an enemy with a melee attack, because that reinforces kind of my concept of a pit fighter as a melee focused class, so I think that's really good. I do think it would have been really cool if there was like a secondary component of the Flourish ability that said if you brought an enemy down to 0 HP with the attack, that you got some additional healing off of it. And this would kind of represent your like dramatic final blow. I think that would be really cool. All right, let's see. Implacable. You have advantage on constitution checks to resist injury, poison, or endure extreme environments. So yeah, I like this. I think it's a very flavorful ability while also being relatively situational, so as not to be completely overpowered. So I like that quite a bit. All right, the next ability we have here is called Last Stand. You get up from dying with 1 hit point on a natural d20 roll of 18 to 20. And to give this some context in the core rules, most other characters only get up on a roll of a natural 20. So this is a considerable improvement over the kind of standard ability that most characters have. I will say I really do like the concept of a last stand ability. I like it when there are built-in mechanics that can kind of lead to these very cool and dramatic moments in game without having to be something that I, as the GM, have to like manufacture. Just kind of up to the kind of the will of the dice. Also, it's just very cool from like a cinematic or narrative perspective. You always love those moments when the hero gets back up after you think that they've been defeated. So I really, really do like last stand abilities in general, and I think this one is pretty well implemented. So I'm a pretty big fan. The next ability here is Relentless. It says 3 times a day when you are reduced to 0 HP, make a DC 18 Constitution check. The implacable talent applies to this roll. Okay, on a success, you instead go to 1 HP. Okay, cool. So again, this is like another kind of last stand adjacent ability. Yeah, I really like this. I think it's cool and thematic. I like the fact that it has a limited number of usages per day, so it doesn't become completely insane. A DC 18 Constitution check is pretty high, although you do get advantage of it as a result of the other ability, so I think that's fine. And I like the fact it doesn't just completely wipe out all the damage, but instead just brings you to 1 hit point. I think that's very cool. I can definitely tell that they are really doubling down on the theme of survivability for the Pit Fighter class, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think that is one of the core components of what I think of when I think of Pit Fighter. But this is like an awful lot of survivability related stuff crammed into a single class, so we'll have to see how that ends up playing out. All right, moving on here to the Pit Fighter talents. Let's see if we've got anything interesting here. All right, first one is 1 time a day, ignore all damage and effects from 1 attack. I really like that. I think that's a cool ability. I do like that it makes the player kind of choose like when they want to use this ability. So I think that's pretty good. So the question is like, do I use it now on this kind of medium damage attack, or do I wait and try to use it, try to optimize it with some higher damage attack? But I imagine also like most players might just use this to avoid going down. So I guess that is fine as well. Again, if it feeds into this central theme of the Pitfire survivability, but also again, we're stacking a lot of survivability related stuff onto this class. And I don't know. It feels like a little bit of overkill, but let's keep going. The other interesting one I see here is increase the HP you gain from Flourish by 1d6. Okay, I mean, that seems fine to me. The rest of these are kind of more vanilla options, but there's nothing wrong with that. One thing I do notice about these other talents is it does, again, kind of reinforce the melee focus theme of the Pit Fighter, which I'm very happy about because that's what I think of when I think Pit Fighter. So no real complaints about the Pit Fighter talents above and beyond what we've already talked about. All right, so now that we've kind of gone through the Pit Fighter class rules, I just wanted to give a couple general thoughts and kind of first impressions on the class based on what we know. I do really like the fact that the Pit Fighter seems to fill a mechanical niche and creates the option for a fairly constitution-based character. So it kind of fills in the gap in the roster where if you roll up a character and you get really high constitution, but all your other stats are kind of middling or low, this creates a good class for that type of character to go into. So I like that a lot. I also appreciate the kind of unifying theme of survivability for the class, largely because that plays into one of the core elements of what I consider a pit fighter to be, which is a very tough and rugged individual. And the class certainly feels very strong from a defensive or survivability standpoint. I mean, I think we saw it was like 4 or 5 different abilities that were all very much themed around keeping this character alive. But I do wonder if maybe we went just a little bit overboard on the survivability abilities for the Pit Fighter. And I also wonder, is there a way that we could have achieved the same or similar effect with fewer abilities kind of focused on that same niche? In particular, it feels like there's a lot of both thematic and functional overlap between Last Stand and the Relentless ability. And I feel like we could have probably just had one or the other and then replaced the one that we didn't use with something that maybe covers a different aspect of the core fantasy of the Pit Fighter. I'm not really sure exactly what those other abilities might be, but I'm sure we could come up with something cool if we spend a little bit of time thinking about it. So overall, I do think that the Pit Fighter is a relatively solid class, but there are definitely some things that I would be tempted to change if I wasn't thrilled with the way that the Pit Fighter class was playing out at the table. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the Pit Fighter class as well. Do you like the abilities as they're laid out, or would you have preferred a slightly different flavor to what we got? Oh yeah, I frequently forget to do these. If you are enjoying this first impressions of the Pit Fighter class, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I do plan on doing more videos like this in the future, so definitely be on the lookout for those. All right, let's take a look at these new pit fighting rules. I'm pretty excited about this. All right, so it says during downtime, PCs can participate in pit fights to gain treasure, experience, and fame. Okay, sounds cool. I do wonder, it says during downtime. I wonder if this is going to be a replacement or alternative to carousing, or if it's going to be supplemental in some way. So I'm going to be on the lookout for that. All right, lethality. The lethality of the fight depends on the venue and stakes. Killing humanoids is forbidden in most public venues. That makes sense. Pit fighting is not without risks. Game masters might use the enduring wounds table for vicious injuries. Okay, cool. So I like the way this is being set up here. I like the fact that lethality is on the table, but it's not necessarily the most common outcome, and that there seems to be a strong sense of risk versus reward, and that there can be consequences for the PCs losing a fight. That doesn't necessarily mean that their character is gone. So let's keep going. All right, setting up about. Roll in the venue and stakes tables for an available pit fight. Groups of PCs use their average party level or APL for stakes rolls. Okay. Based on the venue and stakes, the GM decides the danger level and foe. We'll see rules for that later. And shares those details. Then the fighters decide to accept or decline the bout. Fighters who break their word risk losing future bout offers. Okay. Okay. Cool. I mean, that seems reasonable. I don't think I understand the full implications of what the system is saying yet, but it seems to have all the components that are necessary. So let's keep reading. Danger level low. Low stakes are a safe venue. Fight to half HP or knockout. Okay. The GM uses the low stakes pit fight encounter rules. Okay, that makes sense. And again, we're not seeing a fight to the death here. We're seeing half HP or knockout. So I like that there is a low risk option if the players decide to opt for that. All right, mid stakes. Mid stakes or moderately risky venue, fight to knockout or on rare occasion death. The GM uses the mid stakes pit fight encounter tables. Okay, so again, this is kind of like an escalation of what we saw from the low stakes. So we're saying knockout and on rare occasion death. And then let's see, high stakes here, high or epic stakes. Fight to the death is common. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. This feels like a very natural progression of the risk aspect of things. And again, I just hope that the reward aspect also scales appropriately. All right, cool. Twist. I can already tell I'm like this section. All right, the GM secretly checks whether a surprise twist occurs that is revealed during the bout. Okay. Yeah, so I think this is really cool. I'm curious to see what the actual twists are. I can think of a couple cool ones, but I'm curious to see what they end up giving us. All right, results. The winners get the stakes, see the main book for treasure tables and resulting XP. Some NPC relationships or rivalries may also change as a result. Okay, cool. That sounds fun. All right, let's take a look at some of these tables. Venue. Shady back alley or tavern cellar at night. Cage fight, small arena, open air, large arena, luxurious private arena, glorious coliseum. Yep, that makes sense. Seems like it covers all of the standard bases there, so I guess I don't have any complaints. I am kind of curious, like, what impact does the venue have, like, mechanically? Is it a mechanical thing, or is it just like a role player flavor thing? I'm interested to see if this has larger ramifications. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned. All right, stakes. So APL, average party level plus 1d6, low, medium, high, epic. Okay. That is interesting. So low, medium, high, epic. So there's 4 different classifications, but we only had 3 different danger levels. I wonder if there's a reason why there's a mismatch there. Maybe I'm missing something. Okay. Twists. Okay, yeah. Twists. Additional danger, trap, hazard, unexpected foe, banned resources. Okay, very cool. I like those. None. A donor increases the stakes by 1 level. Okay, that's interesting. An attendee throws a useful boon, item, or spell to the fighters during the bout. Okay, cool. I really like these. I think that I like the idea of there potentially being a twist, and also the fact that there's a chance that there isn't one. I think this adds some additional variety and also captures some of the flavor of what you might see in stories or narratives that involve pit fighting or gladiator arenas. I feel like this is kind of a pretty common and classic trope in those kinds of stories. You know, where the enemy might be cheating in some way, or the rules get changed halfway through the match. So I think that's kind of cool and thematic, and the rules for it are pretty simple and straightforward. So I think this is a really good addition. So good stuff. I also like the fact that there is a chance that some good things happen for the PCs, like on a high roll. I think there might be an inclination to make all twists bad, but I like the fact that there's also a positive option for the PCs if the roll turns out in their favor. So very cool. All right, and it looks like there are okay. These are like the rewards, I guess, for the various different stake levels. I might just go. I'm not probably not going to go over all these. But we'll look at low stakes for now. So it's a D4. The bout is for okay. So they're like the reward for the bout is 20 gold pieces, a small favor from NPC. I like that. That's kind of cool. +2 on next carouse roll. I really like that. I'll talk about that in a second. And then treasure 20 through 100 on treasure 0 to 3. Okay, so probably like roughly low level treasures. I actually like this quite a bit. So you can have a gold favor, you can have a small favor from an NPC, which I really like because that it kind of creates some emergent narrative or gameplay, and I'm always a big fan of that. And it could be that that small favor is worth significantly more than 20 gold pieces. So that's kind of interesting and cool. I'm glad they included that. Next is +2 on next carouse roll. I really like this because this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the pit fighting section. I was going to see if this was going to be like kind of like a replacement for carousing or if it was going to supplement it in some way. And I'm actually really happy that they went for kind of like a supplemental slash complementary route because I think it's cool that these systems now work together with each other as opposed to being competing for the player's attention. It also makes sense to me thematically. Like, of course, after you win this big fight, you want to go out and party, and I think that's a good way for the two systems to work together. So I think that's really cool. And then looks like some fairly low level treasure on the max roll, so that seems good to me too. Maybe there's an opportunity for the characters to get some magical items here, which I think is awesome. So very very cool. I'm probably not going to spend too much time on the rest of these stakes. Yeah, it looks like just like a very natural progression from what we see in the low stakes area. Although there is one here under epic stakes, it says instead of getting like a favor from progressively more powerful people, you get the wish from a genie, Jin. I don't know. I think it's Jin. Although I don't think I've ever seen it with an I at the end. Jin. I'm pretty sure it's Jin. I'm gonna go Jin. Yeah, yeah. So a wish from a Jin, which is very very cool. All right, let's take a look at these pit fighting encounters tables. Again, I don't think we're going to go through all of these. We'll probably just go through the low stakes one for now. Okay, so we roll a d6. Looks like there's a possibility of it being one or two different creatures. That's interesting. I wonder if those creatures are on the team or if they're kind of like free for all, or it's kind of like a free for all fight. That's pretty interesting. And then it looks like there's also a chance here for a complication. Okay. All right, so we've got some lions here. We've got a rookie. That must be a new NPC. Bandit, soldier, centipede, thug. Man, they love their centipedes, huh? Bandits. Okay, I mean that makes sense. It does look like that the lower you roll, the worse off that the encounter is going to be for the characters. But I think that's fine. Let's see. Complications. 10-foot deep pit, spiked nets, burning oil. That all seems very thematic. I'm just gonna browse these higher level ones, just see if there's anything interesting. Yep, there's some pretty interesting stuff on these tables as well. Looks like we got a couple new NPCs slash monster stat lines, but that's good to see. And then more complications here. I like this one. No gear to start. That's one of my favorites. And then maybe there's gear like scattered around the arena. I think that could be like a really cool little scenario. So I think that's interesting. Uh, yep. All right. Then the high stakes stuff. Yeah, and as you might expect, the the caliber and the difficulty of the monsters scales up pretty significantly here. And then these complications: anti-magic zone, spiked boulders, fire jets. I really like that. Again, I think this is a very natural progression. Kind of going from the lower risk, lower reward to the higher risk, higher reward. So these are pretty cool. I approve. Scrolling down here. Oh, I didn't even recognize this. Okay, so it looks like the rules are split out between solo pit fights, and then you also have tables for group pit fights. So that's pretty cool. I like that. Yeah, I actually really like that. I like the implication that this is something that a PC can go off and do by themselves, or it's something that the group can participate in together. I think that's really cool. I like the fact that there are solo encounters that are kind of included with this, and that might make like for a good introduction to solo Shadowdark. So maybe I'll consider doing that video in the future. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel in case I end up doing that, so you can see it. All right, let's look at these higher stakes of the group fights. Yep, I mean it's exactly kind of what you would expect. A general escalation of the difficulty of creatures that the party would be fighting. I really like some of these complications. So again, we got no gear to start, chained to a post. This one turns like the fight into capture the flag. I think that's pretty cool. Let's see, and then this is like the highest level one here. Okay, yeah, complications over a fatal fall. Another anti-magic zone. Yeah. So yeah, I mean these are pretty cool. I think that the rules in combination with the random tables really have sparked a ton of ideas for how to run this type of game. So yeah, that's actually really interesting, and I'm feeling very very good about the pit fighting section of the rules. So yeah, pretty awesome. I will say I don't know if I understand exactly how all the elements of the various different pit fighter rules work together. I think I touched on it briefly, but I'm still not really sure what impact venue has on the rest of the system. I know it says here under the setting up about rules, roll on the venue and stakes tables for an available pit fight. Based on the venue and stakes, the GM decides the danger level and foe. But it feels like you're just rolling for the stakes anyway, and the stakes seem to dictate what the danger level is. So I guess I'm not really sure. What the impact of the venue is, and I don't think it's made super clear in the rules. So I guess I'd have to read that a little bit more closely and figure out how all of this works together, but I do find myself really enjoying the pit fighting rules, and I think it would be really cool and interesting to run, either an adventure or a short campaign that kind of focuses on or is centered around the pit fighting rules available in this supplement. I think it would be like a pretty good change of pace from the more dungeon crawly style of adventures that we have been running in Shadowdark so far. And I think it might help create a style of adventure that's a little bit more combat focused. And I can maybe scratch that itch for some of my players that do prefer a more combat focused game. So I think this is a two birds, one stone kind of situation. And I'm actually really excited to dig in and give these rules a shot. All right, let's also take a look at these new Enduring Wounds rules. All right, so it says if a PC survives going to 0 HP after a severe injury, they might suffer an enduring wound. That character must pass a DC 12 con check or roll on the below table for an immediate effect. I do like the idea of permanent or semi-permanent consequences for being downed that don't necessarily involve the character outright dying. So let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So right off the bat, the worst result here is heart attack. Pass a DC 15 con check or perish instantly. I actually really like this. I like the chance that this is in fact a lethal injury. I do think that creates a real sense of drama and tension around this roll. So I think that is very nice. Also, even though this is a 5% chance that the character just outright dies, we also have to keep in mind that it's possible that the character has some sort of luck token saved up for just this type of situation. And this would be an excellent time to use a luck token if you do happen to land on the heart attack roll on this table. All right, looks like the next entry here is Lop. You lose a limb, and then you roll randomly to determine which one it is. I think that's cool and thematic. I do find myself wishing that there were more fleshed out rules for what the implication of losing these various different limbs are. And I'm sure I can come up with something for my game, but it would be a little annoying to roll on this table without having already thought through what some of the implications of this injury are. And again, I do kind of just wish it was spelled out for us what the mechanical implications would be. Yep, so just looking through the rest of these, looks like you permanently lose 1 point of, and then whatever attribute. I think those make sense. You permanently lose 1 HP. I like that one. One piece of gear you wield is destroyed. Yep, makes sense. Looks like bleeding, disoriented, blinded, chances to lose your action. Yep, that all makes sense to me. Yeah, no, I really like this chart in general. I do want to say I really like the fact that there does appear to be a neutral option here in Scarred. So this is a chance for the character to kind of get off a little bit scot-free, while also having some maybe narrative or role play impacts. The fact that they now have, this new scar or some sort of very near-death experience. I think that's really cool. And then also at the last one here, the natural 20 miracle, you have advantage on your next attack or check. Very, very cool. I like the fact that there is a potentially positive outcome to this dice roll. Again, it creates that sense of dramatic tension, and it could be like a really awesome, like cool comeback moment in the fight. And I just really like that that was included. So overall, I do really like the new Enduring Wounds rules and random table, and I probably will be using this in my Shadowdark games moving forward. So very, very cool. All right, so now that we are coming up on the end of the video, I did want to go ahead and give you some of my final thoughts. So at the beginning of the video, I did pose the question, is the Pit Fighter a broken class due to all the survivability that it gets? And I think the answer is that no, the class really isn't broken so much as it is a little bit too one-dimensional for my taste. I do think that there is a solid core to the Pit Fighter class, but I think a little bit too much emphasis was placed on the survivability aspect of the class, maybe at the expense of other potentially more interesting abilities. In particular, I think there's a little bit too much overlap between the Last Stand and Relentless abilities. And if it were up to me, I think that I would keep the Relentless ability in the game, but replace the Last Stand ability with another potentially more offensively focused ability. I think that even though Pit Fighters may not be the specialized weapon masters that the standard fighter is, I think they are much more martially capable than a majority of the other classes, even above and beyond the sheer variety of weapons that they are able to equip and use. And I'd like to see more of that martial prowess reflected somewhere in the class's mechanics. We do see a little bit of this in the Pit Fighters class talents, but not enough for my liking. But despite my overall mixed opinions on the Pit Fighter class itself, I have to say that I am actually really excited about both the pit fighting and the enduring wounds special rules that were introduced in this supplement. And the more I think about it, the more excited that I am getting about the possibility of running a pit fighting themed adventure or mini campaign, either solo or with my group. I think it'd just be a really exciting change of pace from what we have been doing. And it might also present the opportunity for me to run a more combat focused game, which I think might scratch the itch of some of my more combat focused players while still keeping them in the Shadowdark ecosystem. If you've enjoyed these first impressions, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel, as well as watching this next video that has more of my first impressions on the Curse Scroll line of Shadowdark products. I think that about wraps it up for now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye.